Welcome you all to Believers IAS Academy. This is Polity lecture number 2, especially about the prelims analysis playlist that we have recently started. And in today's video, we will be discussing the 11 must-know questions from the chapter Constitutional Assembly of India, or let's say from the topic Constitutional Assembly of India, or if you will have to get the direct relevance from the Polity Lakshmikant, it's the making of Indian Constitution, right? One of the most important chapters. Of course, there have been questions which have been in the prelims so far. However, the entire chapter from the Polity Lakshmikant, we have summarized it or brought it down within these 11 important questions. And if these 11 important questions, if you are able to answer it then and there just by reading the questions, it means that you're super comfortable and super fine with that particular chapter. You can just move forward. And anyway, this particular video is about discussion of that particular 11 questions, alongside ensuring that it will help you revise in a different way. Okay, let's begin. So what are these 11 questions? Question number 1. When did the Indian National Congress first demand Constituent Assembly and why? What were the main provisions of the Constituent Assembly as proposed under the Cabinet Mission Plan 1946? Third, how were the members of the Constituent Assembly elected and when were the elections held? Because if you see each and everything that you read in Lakshmikant, it is in a paragraph basis, and when you just read, you're just doing a one-way reading, or let's say a one-way thing that happens, just like you're just absorbing something, it just goes to your mind. Now, what we are trying to do is we are completely trying to frame it in the question answer format, right? So people who have read Lakshmikant, especially that particular chapter, and now when you're hearing these questions, I am definitely sure you'll be able to make sense and draw the inclinations, right? Question number 4. When was the first meeting of the Constituent Assembly held and who presided over it? Who moved the objective resolution and what was its significance? Question number 6. From where does the authority and power of sovereign India flow? There has been a lot of questions, PYQs on this particular topic. What changes did the Indian Independence Act 1947 bring to the position of the Constituent Assembly? Question number 8. Who chaired the Constituent Assembly and where it functioned as a legislative body, especially when it functioned as a legislative body? What was the role of the drafting committee and who chaired it? When was the constitution drafted and adopted and enforced? What were the key facts and criticisms related to the Constituent Assembly? Now we'll just quickly discuss all these 11 questions. First question: when the Indian National Congress first demanded the Constituent Assembly and why? Well, it is in the year 1935. It was first demanded by the Indian National Congress, and the demand was based on the principle that India's constitution must be framed by the Indians themselves. They didn't wanted the Britishers to form a constitution for them. Rather, they wanted to have their own constitution, pretty much similar to the Swarajya concept that they were pretty much requesting for, and this reflecting popular sovereignty and self-determination. Second question: what were the main provisions of the Constituent Assembly as proposed under the Cabinet Mission Plan 1946? So Cabinet Mission Plan, one of the important topics even from the modern history perspective. Please go read what that is, right? Well, from the polity perspective, there are 6 important points you have to know. Well, the Constituent Assembly to frame the constitution. So these were the main provisions of the Constituent Assembly which was proposed under the Cabinet Mission Plan, right? First one is constituting. The Constituent Assembly wanted to frame the constitution for themselves, and the members are to be indirectly elected, or members to be indirectly elected, not direct election but indirect way, and provinces and princely states to be represented, means the representation, people who are indirectly elected must be from the provinces and also from the princely states, and the seats are to be allocated based on the population, and the provinces were divided into general, Muslim and Sikh constituencies. Keep in mind, if the option says Hindu, no, answer is absolutely wrong. It is general, Muslim and Sikh, and grouping of provinces proposed as groups A, B and C. And also there are a few more important information that you have to keep in mind, that the entire Constituent Assembly were partly elected and partly nominated, correct? So there are few things, and also this was within the limited franchisee, that is also there. Okay, So all of these things are important, which is there in Lakshmikant. You can just go through, and I hope, especially when we are solving this, all of these things are coming to your mind. Next, third question: how were members of the Constituent Assembly elected, and when were the elections held? The members were indirectly elected by the provincial legislative assemblies. Right? It's not the it is not the central legislative assembly, but the provincial legislative assembly, and the election was through proportional representation by single transferable votes, and elections were held in July-August 1946. This date per se is not required, is not like UPSC will not ask the question based on when the elections were held, but rather this will help you create a timeline. Let's say there was the question which talks about the timeline. It has given you various events and data and dates. So if you know probably this particular date, as in when the elections were held between July and August 1946, it will be pretty much helpful, so that it can indirectly help you in solving other questions. Anyway, fourth question: when was the first meeting of the Constituent Assembly held, and who presided over it? Well, the first meeting was held on 9th December 1946. Absolutely not required, but just the timeline, right? And who was the first president? He was a temporary president, Dr. Sachidananda Simha. Later, it was Dr. Rajendra Prasad who was elected as the president of the Constituent Assembly, and there were two vice presidents who were part of the Constituent Assembly, two vice presidents especially, and I want you all to let me know in the comment section. Anyway, the third one, fifth question is who moved the objective resolutions and what was its significance? There are four important points. It was moved by Jawaharlal Nehru, and on 13th December 1946, and it laid down the philosophical foundation of the Constitution. So there can be a statement that let's say preamble lays down the philosophical foundation of the Constitution. It is more or less the same, because the preamble is pretty much the similar carbon copy, or let's say it's not the exact carbon copy, but it is the reiteration of the objective resolution, and also objective resolution lays down the philosophical foundation of the Constitution. Both can be correct. And third point emphasized sovereignty, justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity, and became the basis of the preamble, right? So this point is absolutely important. So UPSC will not ask what objective resolution is or who passed it, but what is its significance, what it laid down, right? So it laid down the philosophical foundation, and even preamble lays down the philosophical foundation of the Constitution. Even that is also equally correct. Sixth question: from where does the authority and power of sovereign India flow? Very important question. Very it looks kind of very philosophical, very ambiguous, but it is outrightly mentioned in the preamble itself that the authority and power of sovereign India flows from the people of India, not anybody else, not the government of India, not the British cabinet, or not the Constitution, but the people of India, right? Very important. Most likely, most of the students, especially beginners, get them wrong, and this question already has been asked in the PYQs, but still it is good to know. This principle is explicitly stated in the preamble of the Constitution. Seventh question: what changes the Indian Independence Act 1947 bring to the position of the Constituent Assembly? Well, Constituent Assembly, after the Indian Independence Act 1947, it became a fully sovereign body. Means nobody can question it, right? Except the people in the parliament, who are discussing it. Especially, why I'm using the word parliament, because parliament outrightly wasn't there back then, but the Constituent Assembly pretty much had a dual role, right? It functioned as a Constituent Assembly and also as a parliament also, right? It had both functions, both the function of creating the Constitution, and also functioned as the legislative wing of the country as well, right? And next point: no longer subject to British Parliament, means the 1947 Indian Independence Act brought in full sovereign nature for let's say to the Indian continent, or let's say the Constituent Assembly, which is trying to frame laws for the country, became fully sovereign. Means now they are no longer subject to British Parliament and could modify or repeal any British law applicable to India. So this is the significance of the Indian Independence Act 1947 as a whole. Okay, detailed specifics are given in the Lakshmikant, which you definitely have to know, but UPSC tends to ask or try to hit that very basic fundamentals whenever they want to test the aspirants knowledge of understanding, right? So that is the reason why we are discussing only about the holistic understanding of all the important events or the things which are there in that particular chapter. Anyway, eighth question: who chaired the Constituent Assembly when it functioned as a legislative body? We discussed it had two functions. It was also framing the constitution, and also it was functioning as a legislative body as well. So Dr. Rajendra Prasad chaired the assembly when functioning as the central legislative assembly. It was G.V. Mavlankar. So basically, when it functioned as a legislative assembly, it was G.V. Mavlankar, and when it functioned as a constituent assembly, when it was probably pretty much shaping or drafting the constitution, it was Dr. Rajendra Prasad. Okay. Next is, what was the role of the drafting committee and who chaired it? Well, the drafting committee was set up on 29th August 1947. We all know who is the chairman, and we also know what is the important reason or important function of the drafting committee. Well, it was Dr. B.R. Ambedkar who was the chairman, and it consisted of 7 members. Also, it is important to know few of the members' names as well. Next is, it was responsible for the drafting of the constitution, pretty well understood. Now, when was the constitution drafted, adopted and enforced? However, even before we solve this 10th question, discuss this 10th question, 9th question, I would say that it is also very required for you to know all the important committees, especially standing committee, I mean the ruling committee, all those things, which in which some of the important personalities like Jawaharlal Nehru, be it Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, or even for that matter Rajendra Prasad, were all present as a chairman or even as a member. So some of the important committees which are given in Lakshmikant, that is also important. Questions have been asked and question will definitely be framed. Please, mind you, please by heart, or let's say this is something that you have to by heart, the committee's names and the important panel members in that, right? Anyway, moving to the next 10th question: when was the constitution drafted, adopted and enforced, and why was 26th January chosen? Recently we celebrated the Republic Day, and I am sure that this will be of more relevance. Well, the first draft published on February 1948, constitution adopted on 26th November 1949, and it came into force in 26 January 1950. So the date chosen was to honor the Purna Swaraj, which was adopted on 26th January 1930. So important details you cannot miss. Now, 11th question and the last question: what were the key facts and criticisms related to the Constituent Assembly? Of course, Constituent Assembly did a wonderful job framing the Constitution, becoming the first legislative body, acting as an parliament, the first parliament. However, it also had a lot of shortcomings, a lot of criticisms. So here are few of the important criticisms. One is the Assembly met for 11 sessions over 2 years, 11 months and 18 days. It's a very long time. And then it had 284 members, who signed the constitution, and original constitution had 395 articles and 8 schedules, and highest representation came from the United Province and the Madras. United Province is the present day Uttar Pradesh, and then Madras, and followed by Calcutta. Okay, so the majority, the representation, higher representation. And UP, talking about UP, I think it is more than 40%, 49% the representation came from the United Province or the present Uttar Pradesh. However, the major criticisms is that it is not directly elected, because some of the members were partially nominated, partially elected, partially nominated, right? So it was like that, and it was mostly dominated by one particular party, which is the Congress party, and represented limited sections, right? We discussed limited franchisee, right? It did not have more representation in terms of the actual scenario of the Indian subcontinent, but it had very, very limited sections, and it took too much of time, all of those things, right? Anyway, that's all for this particular video. I hope you have gotten the essence of this particular video. So stay tuned. We will come with another video, probably with the next few chapters, and I think we will make the best use of whatever time we have till the prelims. And the link to this PDF will also be put in the video's description. Please make sure you do check them out. And anyway, that's all for this particular video. Signing off, this is Madan Gopal. Have a wonderful day.